I'm 94 years old, and even now in the middle of summer, with the windows open, my hands remember cold that most people can't even imagine. Not the cold of a Maine winter, though I grew up with plenty of that. A different cold, a cold with teeth. December 1950, Chosin Reservoir up in the mountains of North Korea. I was 18 years old, a Marine, and I want you to understand something before I go any further. Nobody trained us for 30 below zero. Nobody trained us for rifles that wouldn't fire because the oil froze solid inside them, or for watching a man's canteen crack open because the water inside had turned to ice against his own chest. We went up into those mountains, 18,000 strong, give or take, surrounded before we even understood we were surrounded. 9 nights we held that line. 9 nights of cold I still feel in my knuckles on a July afternoon. 60-something years later, I made it out. I walked out on my own 2 feet, which is more than I can say for a lot of good men I served beside. I still don't fully understand why I was one of the ones who did. Back home in Millbridge, Maine, my father worked the boats, hauling lobster traps before the sun came up, and I figured that'd be my life too. Cold water, salt air, hands that never really got warm even in August. I thought I knew what cold was. I didn't know a thing. We came up from the coast at Hungnam, moved inland toward the reservoir in trucks and on foot, and the temperature dropped a little more every mile, like the mountains themselves were closing a door behind us. By the time we dug in, it was already 20 below, and it only got worse from there. My platoon sergeant was a man named Eugene Whitfield, older than most of us by a good 10 years. Korea veteran of the First War, too. No, wait, this was his first war, but he'd been in the Pacific in 45, and he carried himself like a man who'd already seen the worst the world had to offer. He looked at us, a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds shivering in foxholes we'd hacked out of frozen ground with entrenching tools that bent more than they dug. And he said, "Boys, dig deeper. The ground's the only thing between you and them tonight." I dug like my life depended on it. It did. The Chinese came that first night in numbers I still can't put an honest count to. Whistles first. That's the thing nobody tells you. The whistles and the bugles. Coming down off the ridgeline in the pitch dark. And then the mountainside itself seemed to start moving. My rifle jammed on the second shot, just seized up solid, the bolt frozen tight as a rock, and I remember slamming it against my knee, cursing at it in a voice that didn't sound like mine, while a man not 6 feet away from me, a kid from Ohio, Private Doyle, 19 years old, worked his own weapon loose just in time. We held. That first night we held, though I couldn't tell you exactly how. Some of it was training. Most of it, I think, was just refusing to be the man who broke the line for everybody else. By morning, the cold had taken as many of us as the fighting had. A boy 2 foxholes down from me had frostbite so bad on his feet, he didn't feel them get shot through. He didn't know he was hit till somebody pulled his boot off and found the blood frozen solid inside it. That's the kind of war it was. The cold didn't take sides, it just took. We ate what we could carry, and half of it froze solid before we could get it down. Rations turned to ice in the can. A man could break a tooth on a chocolate bar if he wasn't careful, and I watched more than one fella nearly do just that, laughing about it in a way that wasn't really laughing. Just something a body does when it's too tired and too cold to cry. Sleep wasn't sleep. It was closing your eyes for 10 minutes at a time between watches, curled up as small as you could manage, praying you'd wake up with all your fingers still working. Sergeant Whitfield made his rounds every hour through that whole ordeal, kicking boots gently, checking faces, making sure nobody had gone still in a way that meant something worse than sleeping. Wiggle your toes, Sullivan. No, wrong name, my mistake. Force of habit from another story. He'd say it to whoever was nearest. Wiggle your toes, keep the blood moving or you'll lose 'em. Simple as that. That's what leadership looked like up there. Not speeches. Just a man making sure the fella next to him still had feeling in his feet come morning. I did what he said. Every hour. Whether I was awake enough to remember or not, some part of me kept those toes moving. Night 4 or 5, I lost count exactly which. We got the order that we weren't holding anymore. We were moving. Fighting our way south, back down toward Hagaruri, because the position wasn't holdable much longer, and everybody up that chain of command finally admitted it out loud. I remember a colonel's words got passed down the line, man to man, and by the time it reached me, it had turned into something like a joke that wasn't really a joke at all. Retreat? Hell. We're just attacking in a different direction. I didn't laugh when I heard it. None of us did. But I've thought about those words more times over the years than almost anything else from that whole war. Because that's exactly what it was. We weren't running. We were fighting our way out, dragging our wounded, carrying our dead, when we could manage it, refusing to leave a man behind if there was any breath left in him at all. Private Doyle, the Ohio boy, took a wound in that stretch. Nothing that put him down for good, but enough that 2 of us took turns half carrying him for the better part of a day. He kept apologizing the whole way, like being wounded was some kind of inconvenience he was causing us. Shut up and walk, Doyle, I told him. He did. The road south wasn't really a road. It was a mountain pass carved through country that didn't want us there, 17 kilometers of it before we'd reach any kind of safety. And every foot of it was under fire from the high ground on either side. We moved by day when we could and dug in tight when we couldn't. And Sergeant Whitfield never once let us stop believing we'd make it, even on the nights when I wasn't sure he believed it himself. There was a bridge blown out by the enemy to trap us in that valley for good. Engineers dropped sections of it in by air, piece by piece, while we held the perimeter and waited, watching our breath freeze in front of our faces, watching the sky for aircraft that meant maybe, just maybe, we weren't as alone up there as it felt. I remember looking at my own hands at one point and not recognizing them, swollen, cracked, barely able to work a trigger anymore. I remember thinking about my father's hands, hauling traps in the cold Atlantic water back home, and how I used to think that was hard work. I understood something different about hard work by then, about cold, about what a body can be asked to do and somehow impossibly still do. The 9th night is the one that stays with me clearest, even now, even with everything else that's faded around the edges of an old man's memory. We were close to Hungnam by then, close enough that some of the boys had started talking quiet and careful, like speaking it out loud might jinx it, about maybe actually making it out of those mountains alive. Sergeant Whitfield caught 2 of us doing that kind of talking and shut it down fast. We're not out till we're out. Keep your head down and your eyes open. He wasn't a hard man, not really, but he understood something about hope in a place like that. Too much of it too early could get you killed just as easy as too little. That night, dug into a position that felt no different from the 8 before it, The Chinese came one more time, hard, and it was close. Closer than any of the nights before. I remember Whitfield beside me in the dark, both of us out of easy words by then, just doing what needed doing, and at some point in the worst of it, he put a hand flat on my shoulder, just for a second, the way you'd steady a man on a boat deck in rough water. Almost there, son. That's all he said. 2 words that weren't a promise exactly, but felt like one. We held. One more time we held. By the time we reached Hungnam and I saw the harbor, saw actual ships waiting to take us out of that frozen country, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something closer to disbelief, like a man waking up from a fever and not trusting yet that the fever is really broken. Of the men in my original platoon who'd gone up into those mountains, 9 nights earlier, 6 of us walked onto that beach under our own power. 6. I still do the arithmetic sometimes, late at night, and it never gets any easier to sit with. If you've walked through this story with me this far, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There's more of these memories I'm still working up the nerve to tell, and I think men like Sergeant Whitfield, men like Private Doyle, deserve to be remembered by more than just a handful of us who were lucky enough to still be around to do the remembering. Because that's the truth about Chosin. Nobody puts in the history books quite right. It wasn't really about the fighting. It was about who you were still standing next to when the fighting finally stopped. I came home to Maine in the spring of '51, and my mother said I looked like I'd aged 10 years in 6 months. She wasn't wrong. Something in my face had changed up in those mountains. Something that never fully changed back. Sergeant Whitfield and I stayed in touch for a good many years, Christmas cards mostly, a phone call now and again when the mood struck one of us. He passed in 1989 and I drove up to Portland for the funeral, stood in a church full of men who understood without anybody needing to explain what 9 nights at 30 below does to the men who lived through it together. Private Doyle, the Ohio boy. I lost track of him sometime in the 60s, the way you do with men from another part of the country, another life. I've thought about trying to find him, more times than I can count. Some part of me is afraid of what I'd learn if I tried. 6 of us walked out of those mountains. I don't know how many of the 6 are still living today. Some mornings, working through the stiffness in my hands, I wonder if I'm the last one carrying it. I don't talk about the cold much, even now. People ask sometimes what Korea was like, and I tell them it was cold, and they nod like they understand, and I let them believe that's the whole answer. Because some things don't translate into words a person can really hold on to, unless they were standing in that particular kind of dark themselves. What I will say is this: I wasn't the toughest man up on that reservoir. I wasn't the bravest either, whatever that word's supposed to mean. I was just a lobsterman's son from Maine who kept his rifle as clear of ice as he could manage and kept walking south when walking south was the only thing left to do. If you've got a Korean War veteran in your family, and there aren't many of us left to ask anymore, I hope you'll go find them and ask them something, anything, while you still can. Tell me about them in the comments. I read every word, and if you want to hear what happened to men like Sergeant Whitfield's unit after Hungnam, when we regrouped and the war kept going another 2.5 years, I've got more of that story too. I'll be here when you're ready.